Pablo Fornals signed for West Ham, I took the mickey a little bit. Not so much out of Pablo Fornals, but more of sometimes when a footballer signs for your club, and you'll recognise what I'm about to say, they try to pretend that they have an affinity to the club that doesn't really exist, that's not really there. I can think of a number of them, and I don't mean to dig out Sam Byram in particularly, but I'm going to mention it. When Sam Byram signed for West Ham, I think it was from Leeds, if I have that right, he was at pains to suggest that some of his family were West Ham fans. They may well have been, but it's that sort of thing. We've heard it numerous times, particularly with foreign players that come over, and they say, I watch the Premier League, and I always enjoy watching West Ham. As I've maintained on numerous occasions, a lot of these players are media trained to within an inch of their lives. So, of course, I would expect them to say that, and it's the right thing to say. But by the same token, I also find it refreshing when some players say, sorry, mate, never heard of you. West Ham, who are they? I don't mind that, and I prefer some sort of candid, honest speaking sometimes. And it wasn't that Pablo Fornals had said anything good or bad. It's just, I think at the time we were linked with this guy. I hadn't heard of him. Didn't know Pablo Fornals. Could have walked past me in the street, wouldn't have known who he was. So I took the mickey a little bit. And I went on social media and I posted a picture of Pablo Fornals stood outside Nathan's as a young lad. And I wrote a message which basically said, I might need my glasses for this, says, as a quote, inverted commas, a quote from Pablo Fornals, which he never said. Said, we used to love going over once a year to see West Ham play. My uncle Franco was a huge EastEnders fan, and we'd often travel from Malaga to Southend in his Seat Toledo. Luis Rigor-Mortis was my favourite player, although I modelled my game on Abdoulaye Faye. It was a Mickey take. It was nothing against Fornals, but it was a Mickey take about players doing exactly what I said. Pretending there's an affinity there that's not. Cut me open and I bleed pie and mash. It's that sort of thing. And so I photoshopped a picture of the fornicator stood in front of Nathan's. Did a little bit of that and you know, the sort of silly things I used to post on Twitter, certainly. I also actually took the mickey out of his... I took the mickey quite a lot. There was a promo video where he was announced to the fans, and the promo video was about an excitable kid searching Pablo Fornals. But he basically, as he searched it, he went onto YouTube, he went onto Google, and he found some footage of this wonderful player. And I even did a spoof video on it and took the mickey a little bit. As I say, nothing against Pablo Fornals at all, because I tell you what, a lot of it has turned out to be true. Not historically, he didn't honestly drive over in a Seat Toledo with his uncle Franco. He never really went to Southend, and he certainly didn't model his game on Abdoulaye Faye and watch Luis Rigor-Mortis stand around for West Ham. No. However, he's grown to love West Ham. And in many respects, he is the modern-day equivalent of the Ginger Pele or Alvin Martin. Of course, Alvin Martin's a Scouser who became a Cockney. James Collins, Ginger Pele. He's a Taffy, right? Are we allowed to say that? Are we allowed to say Taffy anymore? He's a Taffy who became... Do you know what? I guess if we can say Cockney, we can say Taffy. He's a Taffy that became a Cockney. He basically embraced the culture of West Ham. Is Alvin Martin still proud of his Liverpudlian roots? Of course he is. But he loves West Ham. He grew to love West Ham. Does James Collins still love Wales? Of course he does. But he grew to love West Ham. And wasn't it heartening to see him in the away ends games? It just showed that he had a real love. He bought into the culture of the club. And I think we're seeing exactly the same with Pablo Fornals now. The first I sort of became aware of it with Fornals was that not that he was growing in love with the club, but the first I noticed that we had someone different on our hands. Now, I'll tell this story. You've heard this story before. I'll tell it again just in case you haven't. We were at the Oxford game. We were getting thumped. It's 4-0. We travelled to Oxford. Travelled up there with my mate Nick. Well, it wasn't just me and Nick that went to Oxford. Lots of away fans went to watch West Ham Oxford. We got whooped. We shouldn't have got whooped. And as the final whistle went, a lot of the players sort of, slunk off sheepishly a little to the fans. And we were angry, we were not happy at all because it was a disgraceful performance. Yet one player was brave enough to come over to the fans. And if I just describe what was going on at Oxford at the time, they were having some stadium redevelopment done. So they actually had they had a massive gap between the edge of the pitch and the seats in the stands. Sound familiar? But this was obviously a temporary measure for them. Half of the stadium was in a state of disrepair or had actually been demolished. So my point is, it was quite a journey for Fornals to make. It wasn't just to the touch. Anyway, he didn't stop at the touchline. He carried on walking. He carried on walking right up to the point where he came up to the fans. I mean, within touching distance of the fans, and just thanked everyone and applauded all the fans. Not an easy thing to do. Look, an easy thing to do when you've just won 4-0. 5-0, whatever the case may be, when you've just had an emphatic win, walk up to the fans. You accept the applause. You accept the gratification of the fans. But not an easy thing to do when you've just been whooped and you've put in a real crappy performance. Yet he came up to the fans and he was the only one that did. Everybody else disappeared off down the tunnel. Not only that, when he came up, he clapped the fans, but he also said, sorry. I'm sorry. Got the impression he didn't know much English at the time, but he knew I'm sorry. And I thought, okay, well, we've got someone a bit special here, actually. And I mentioned it straight away after the game. Took his shirt off, gave it to one of the kids that had gone down to the front, and actually, what he probably thought was an intimidating section of fans who he'd walked up to, we all ended up applauding him because we appreciated it, and that was. I think that was great. I said on the video, I thought we've got a special player here. Maybe not a special player, but a special person. And that's where I was at the time. Because my initial thoughts on Fornals were not fantastic. I've got to be honest with you. I thought he was probably a little bit slow. I'd seen some good snippets from his time at Villarreal, if I got that right. And he'd played in the Under-21 tournament, where he'd looked okay. He'd looked good. But Ceballos, who was at Real Madrid at the time, who was to go on to play for Arsenal, looked like the standout player in that tournament. So I was impressed. Okay, we've got a character, we've got a person, we've got half a chance. That was the first I was really aware of him in that aspect of things. The second time I was aware of him was really a quote. Now, you've got to remember, in between all of this, I've seen ridiculous work rate. I remember looking at an article and seeing the players that had run most in the Premier League over a weekend. Fornals was top. Remember watching a week later and Souček was top, Fornals was second. So I'm thinking, okay, look, we could see he works hard. Felt he was playing out of position on the left, but he was working very, very hard. I thought, okay, but I can see this. I know we've got a grafter, and we like a grafter at West Ham. It was a comment he made. Read an article. And the article was actually about him and Mikel Antonio, which is lovely, which is actually a friendship, a bromance, whatever you want to call it, which has really bloomed and really flourished, and you can see that now, and he spoke about it the other day, which is what prompted this video. But the article was actually about Mikel Antonio learning Spanish to make Pablo Fornals feel more welcome. I thought that's a wonderful thing to do. It's a great thing to do. It shows Antonio. It shows what a man Antonio is, and he's a great man. He's a great guy, and no wonder they get on. No wonder they're friends. They're both really solid characters. So this was great. But anyway, in the article itself, Fornals had said that he didn't actually know that much about West Ham, but he wished he did, and made a really strange quote. He wished he knew a bit more about West Ham, and he was sure if he'd have been brought up and born in Dagenham, he would have been a West Ham fan. Well, that's a really interesting thing to say. That is just not something that you expect a foreign player to say. That is a million miles from, what was his name? Was it João Mario? Come on, you wires. Do you remember? I don't blame him for trying, but you get the impression with João Mario or people like that, a press officer or an advisor has been in their ear and said, okay, look, this is West Ham. the fans expect a certain amount of thing. Let's at least pretend you know a little bit about the club. You get the impression someone's been in their ear. So someone's been lost in translation. Someone said, "Oh, by the way, the nickname is Bubbles. The nickname of West Ham is Bubbles," and he's obviously heard it as Wires. He said, "Come on, you Wires," without considering why the team he's just signed for would be named after a reel of cable. But it doesn't matter. That's not important. My point is that there was an authenticity to Fornals' quotes about Dagenham. And I thought, okay, well, I really, really like that. And he's just carried on from this, which has got to the point where he's done an article on, I think it was in The Guardian yesterday, and thank you, because a couple of you pointed it out to me in the comments in yesterday's video, so thank you so much. I did go and read it, but he also did one last week as well, which I was very, very aware of. And I was going to say I love this guy. Maybe I do. Look, I mean, it was so. I'll tell you how much. I actually asked Len to make me. Len said, "Oh, you know, I'll send you a picture, mate." And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "Can I have me and El Fornicador, the fornicator?" He's really the only one whose nickname sticks every single time. And I just think he's wonderful, and I'm really pleased that he's now started to score goals. But it's almost secondary, if you like. With that, it's his attitude and it's what he brings to the game. And I say brings to the game, brings to the club. So he told a story about, which I really liked, about Mark Noble. And Mark Noble asked David Moyes, David, there was an injury, I think it was against Liverpool or something like that. David Moyes didn't know what to do, and apparently David Moyes turned around to Mark Noble and said, what should I do? And I know people might see that as a weakness of David Moyes. I don't. I find that a strength. If anything, I've always been a little bit worried that David Moyes would only take his own opinion and he would be too steadfast, too resolute, too stubborn. He comes across a bit like that in press conferences. I am sorry, Moyesy, old son, but you do. But actually, it's not the case. It's why he's bringing a director of football. It's why he listens to Paul Nevin and his coaching staff. He's a man ready to take on new ideas. But anyway, I don't want this to become a David Moyes video. Turn around to Mark Noble, said, "What should I do?" Apparently Mark Noble said, "Give this guy a chance." Talking about El Fornicador, give him a chance. And apparently, he's not looked back since. But it was a lovely thing for Mark Noble to do as well. Apparently, Fornals has said that Noble is constantly in contact. And even when he went into lockdown, he said that there were a number of West Ham players who were constantly phoning him, checking if he was all right, because he was in a foreign country. The biggest thing I can say is he's back home at the moment. I think he's in Malaga. Or he's in Madrid. I think he's in Madrid, actually. He's in Madrid because he's been called up for the Spain team. And why wouldn't he? He's been getting assists as well, and he's been starting for Spain. He's been coming off the bench for Spain. Why wouldn't he be involved in the Spain team? Because if you're from the outside, it's not little old West Ham. West Ham are now, oh, look, we're West Ham are that club that finished in the top six, that were contesting Champions League all season. There is a valid reason to have a West Ham player in your international team. So Fornals has been rewarded. So anyway, he's doing the interview in Madrid, and what I really like is he referred to West Ham as home, and that's wonderful. And he's gone on to say that he wants to spend the rest of his career here. That he loves West Ham. He's learned all the words to Bubbles. It's not I'm forever blowing wires. I'm forever laying cable. No, he's not. And he's learnt them in Spanish as well. Don't ask me to sing it. Don't know what they are. But everything he says is it's not PR. It's not spin. It's from the heart. He means it. He loves living in London. He loves West Ham. He loves the kit. He loves the fans. He loves the anthem. He loves the bubbles, and we like a bit of that as you well. You remember Jordan Hugill saying he couldn't wait to walk out, to the bubbles. And I did tell you, didn't I? I met Hugill once. I met Hugill once before a game. I didn't know. I thought I knew him. I recognised his face, so I thought he was someone from down the boats. And when we do when we do the boats before the games, the boat bars, maybe if you don't know, Hammerschat run boat bars outside the Olympic Stadium before and after games. We've got a nice community down there. We go down, we have a drink, go to the game, we come back. That's where we socialise. But there's obviously there's 200-300 different people down there. You don't know everyone by name, but you recognise faces. And so Hugill was stood on this bridge overlooking the boats. So silly old me, I put two and two together, come up with six. saw this guy whose face I recognised, went up to say hello, mate, how you doing? It was only at that point, such a numpty, I really am. I said, you're Jordan Hugel. And he said, yeah. And I realised actually that I'd recognised this guy because I'd walked down from the station with him, behind him. It was winter. He had a big coat, a big green coat on with a hood. But I'd walked down, it's quite a big walk through Westfield and down through Stratford and whatnot. And it was only then I thought, oh my goodness, okay, so he's got off the train. So I said, what are you doing here? Now, it sounds a ridiculous question. We're outside, West Ham are playing a game, we're outside the stadium. Why would I ask Jordan Hugel, once I'd recognised who he was, what he was doing here? Well, the reason I asked, because he actually was on loan at QPR at that time. But QPR didn't have a game that weekend or whatever. So I said, what are you up to? He said, I just thought I'd come down and, just watch the game. Again, it's another good attitude. I know things didn't work out for Jordan Hugel, but what it did show was even on his day off, and he didn't have to, and he had actually already was on loan. He was on loan at somewhere else. No, he didn't have to come to West Ham. He actually got on a train. Didn't jump in the Lamborghini or anything like that. He got on a train. He came to West Ham on his day off. Walked into that stadium just like a normal fan. Friendly guy, by the way. Really, really friendly guy. And just acted like a normal West Ham fan. And you could see he was embracing the club. Another good character. And this is what Fornals has got in abundance. He is a character who's embraced West Ham. And this is why it's incredibly important to scout for character, as I've said, to scout for personality. Moyes didn't bring Fornals in. It was Huselos and Pellegrini, who were, whatever, sacked, walked out, whatever happened, they were jettisoned pretty quickly. So Fornals was not the manager's choice at all. He found himself in a strange city at a strange club under the stewardship of a manager who hadn't even purchased him. Again, it's attitude. The attitude to work hard, the attitude to work forward. I've said a few times, and in the past, I feel he's the next West Ham cult hero. I said that I thought he was the next James Collins. The more I see, the more I hear, the more I read, the more I think that is absolutely the case. So I love Pablo Fornals. I love El Fornicador. I love the Fornicator. I do hope if he ever gets wind of his nickname, I sort of hope he doesn't, but I do, if he ever gets wind of his nickname, I hope he understands it's done with love, with affection, because I think he's absolutely magnificent. I think he's my favourite player. I think he is. I think he's my favourite player. I think he's probably been my favourite player for a little while. I didn't perhaps realise it. Look, do other players score more goals? Yes. Are there faster players? Yes, there are. More skillful players? Certainly. However, as the complete package, as for someone that has become the Spanish cockney, as someone who's embraced West Ham, embraced the club, and embraced us as fans, Pablo Fornals is my favourite player. And woe betide anybody who tries to sell him.